Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Energy Safety Canada event, the DROPS Canadian chapter launch. And I am your host, Andrew Davis. Just before we get started here today, a little introduction to Zoom for those of you who are new to us. Please do interact with us and ask us some questions at any time. At the bottom of your screen, you should see the participants button. If you click on that, that will pop up a window. And through that window, you can tell us to go faster, go slower, and answer some simple yes/no questions if that comes up. And again, if you're on the mobile device, that'll pop up on the bottom of your screen as well. Just tap that participants button. Further, we do encourage you to ask questions and chat with us, but please direct those questions to me directly. Again, that chat button is at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that and direct that to me privately or to the entire room if you have something you want to put out there. Now, just to ensure that everybody can in fact see our presentation and hear clearly, if you'll bring up that participants menu and just give us a yes or a no if you have issues. If you do have any type of problem, I will private message you and see if I can work through that with you and get you set up. So, okay, a couple of yeses there in the chat. Nobody's saying no. So again, reach out to me if you have any issue. Went one too far. All right, we do have a panel of presenters today. We're very happy to have a number of industry experts available to us. We're going to lead off with Mr. Jose Pinera. Jose is currently with Suncor. He has been an industry professional in health and safety for a number of years. He is a certified safety professional and holds a CRSP. And currently Jose is in charge of the serious injury program at Suncor. We're going to follow up Jose with Mr. Abby Odegan. Abby, again, a industry professional who's worked in Western Canada for a number of years. He is a certified safety professional, and he's done an outstanding job at leading a number of teams. Energy Safety Canada has worked with him on a few occasions. And just a note out to anyone in there looking for some good talent, Abby recently became a free agent in the world of health and safety. So please reach out to Abby if you'd like to engage him. And then we do have joining us from across the pond, Mr. Alan Smith with Silverdot. He is the DROPS expert for training and technical advice. Apologies, Alan, your bio isn't popping up here. I can't read the details. I'm less familiar with Mr. Smith, but we're very happy to have his presence here. And then finally, we're going to close out with my friend and colleague, Mr. Robert Waterhouse. A lot of you will be familiar with Robert. He is a certified industrial hygienist, and he brings a wealth of experience from oil and gas, working for producers, and is very adept at taking concepts and applying them at a field level. So we're happy to have Robert here as well. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jose.
Thank you, Dave. Welcome everybody for the launch of the DROPS Canadian chapter. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I had some issues this morning connecting, and that is new life working from home. It's kind of, and I guess I'm really old to be, using this kind of technology now. Getting use of, but I'm really excited about this work we are going to be launching today. It's going to be a lot of information, but it's not only this presentation. We want you guys to be connected with us and helping us through this program and this work. So we are going to have the agenda. It's going to be this introduction for my part. After we are going to have Abby, who is going to be sharing a safety moment. Later on, I will talk again about why we are considered drops object important and why we are being focusing to this work. Alan is going to be explaining, the connection. I'm really excited working with Alan directly and from seeing, a lot of the drops information, following that information since long time ago. Now we have a direct connection from Canada to the rest of the world. Later on, we are going to be talking about the terms of reference for members of this Canadian chapter, followed by a break. And after, we are going to be giving to Robert Waterhouse, who is going to be explaining, the drop object best practice that it was already provided. It was a working group to develop these best practice, and now it's available at Energy Safety Canada website. He's going to be explaining about the exclusion zone tool. That is something similar to the drops object tool, but he's going to be explaining more about it. It is already a micro learning video that is going to be available. It's on the review, but it's almost finished. I can explain after what is going to be the next step from the Canadian chapter. We are going to be reviewing and answering any questions. Okay. So I don't want to take more time. I will give pass to Avi for the safety moment.
Everybody, we are welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are excited that you are able to make it for this opportunity to have Canadian chapter of drops launch today. And I'll be taking us through safety moment at this time. And please, I would encourage us to ask questions. And these two incidents that I'm going to share with us may not be classical drops events, but let's just take a look and then have a discussion on it. So the first one here is two workers were removing an alignment bolt from an out-of-service pump jack hose head at the storage yard. The hose head was connected to the working beam and situated in an upright position, and therefore containing stored energy. Those are kind of things that I want us to just pay attention to. Worker A was positioned under the working beam, and when worker B began removing the alignment bolt, the working beam collapsed, unfortunately, crushing and fatally injuring worker A. And like I mentioned, it may not look like classical drops events, but at the end of the day, there is what is called there is a working beam that was stored upright, and then there was that stored energy. So from the drops position, we are not working at height, but you will see this issue at worker A being in the line of fire in this instance. And so anytime we have a stored energy at an upright position, due to gravity, that is bound to fall. And but let's quickly look at the second safety moment so that we can discuss the two together. The second safety moment here is also similar to that one at the grade, but it's something that maybe also fatally injured somebody. So the event is a work crew was on location to dismantle a high arc trench box and then transport the disassembled box from one project site to another. The disassemble process did not follow manufacturer's instruction, for the safe removal of the strut support pins holding the box together. Consequently, the last strut support pin was removed from the box. Unfortunately, it collapsed, causing the support arc to strike and fatally injured a worker. So look at these two events, and then I just want us to think through from our own site. Is there a similar scenario that you can see on your site? Though we want to emphasize the effect of graffiti, whether working at below or above grade. In these instances, these two safety moments, you find out that the two of them are, they are working on the grade, but unfortunately, something collapsed, and then a worker was fatally injured. Performing, if you look at these two, you'll find out that the hazard assessment possibly did not recognize these hazards of falling objects. And eventually, we had to lose these wonderful individuals. For specialized equipment, we need to follow manufacturer's specification. This will prevent serious injuries and fatalities in our work sites. The question I have for us, maybe somebody, or maybe if we don't have the time to respond to that, is can similar events occur at your site? And how are you going to prevent that? Can similar events? So the essence of sharing these safety moments, which you can also find in Energy Safety Canada website, is just for us to activate that thinking, that thoughts around drop objects. So I will leave us with this. The Drops Canadian chapter launched today will provide us the tools and the resources to help focus on these types of events. We encourage you and your organization to come on board, and then so that we can help everyone to go home every night. So before I just turn it over to Jose, is there any person, you can unmute yourself and ask any question about this safety moment? What is there a similar, can a similar event occur at your site, and what are you going to do about it? Anybody?
Actually, Abby, we'll have them reply in the chat just to be a little more coordinated. So if anybody does have a thought to put in the chat there, please do add that publicly.
Oh, thank you so much, Andy. So please put your thoughts in the chat, and we would aggregate that and respond to you later. So I want to turn it over to Jose at this time to take the next.
Thank you, Abby. That is a good safety moment. So basically, I suppose if everybody's attending this workshop, it is because you are concerned about drop object. Since my long time ago, when I started working in a project directly involved in the company I'm working for, and right now leading the serious injury and fatality prevention program. And one of the observations we were given, it is a lot of incidents related to drop objects. So when we start working into this, I was started looking for some information and to provide some recommendations back to the organization and see what action we can take. So that is where the drops information was available, and I was attending, including other meetings and other chapters and overseas to see and learn what we can do to improve our performance. So that is the information I'm going to be giving you right now, like giving some additional a background why we are doing and why it's so important. So if I need the next slide, please. Sorry. So a drop object, it continues being a challenge for everybody. And mainly I believe it is because everybody have different opinions about what is a drop object, what is considered to be a drop object, what activities can be related, having the risk to be something to be dropped. And normally before, and Robert know that into our conversations, and we start working this, when I was giving presentations to my organizations talking about drops, leaders often say, no, it is, people, it's not paying attention what they are doing. So we are going to provide more information about that. But is it really important for you guys to have a proper definition what your organization considers to be a drop object? So the definition below It is the definition we have in the best practice that is available through Energy Safety Canada. And this best practice collect several companies, procedure, best practices, and also being supported by DROPS organization. In that way, we have an alignment. At least we can, when we are talking about drop object, we can say we are comparing apples to apples, no apple to orange or something else. So it is as per the best practice, a drop object is defined as an object that falls from height and either cause or has the potential to cause an injury, asset damage, or process safety event. So that is what was approved by the working group. And again, some organizations should have some tweaks about that definition, but it's really important we know what we are talking here. People not being confused about what it is considered a drop object. Next slide, please. So as you know, the drop object can be classified as a static and dynamic, and I know you guys should have more have this information already. So, but it is considered a static drop object is an object that falls from its previous fixed position. So it's only under its own weight solely due to the force of gravity. So it is too many things that could happen related to that. And the second one, it is a dynamic one when something is being hit or I'm using an external force to make something to be dropped. So those are the two categories we have into the drops best practice. And that is based on the hazard assessment we do anytime we are going to be doing any activity. So it is important to identify those types of classification of drop object. Next slide, please. So anyway, during investigations, and there is learning from different organizations that have drops programs or being sharing information about drops incidents. Basically, the contributing factors, including the design of the equipment, the work process. In some cases, it is too much vibration on the equipment through the operation processes. The environment, that is something for me coming from a hot country to move to Canada that is really hot. So now you have other kind of environment and consider about ice. It's a lot of ice, icicles being drops falling during winter times and changes on temperature, behavior of people, working on height. And also it is an inappropriate securing of equipment, materials, structural components, and tools. So that is some of the factors that is being identified during incident investigation. So now, if I would like to start doing full questions, and I believe they have the information how to answer this, Andy, right? There you go.
Yes.
So what is the top? Thank you. So what is the top item being dropped by count that results in a WCB injury? And we are talking about Alberta. That is the statistic we have. So we have tools and equipment, plants, tree branches, ice and snow, parts and material, and furniture. Could you please vote?
All right, Jose, we've got about 30% of the field here reporting in, so we'll give people another minute. Just while we're giving them that time, I wanted to clarify, the ice and snow, we're not necessarily talking about the small icicles outside the house, but I know in, some of the more northern process facilities, you can get ice chunks that are the size of a small car. So, or, we've seen those vehicles traveling down the highway with a giant wedge of snow and they come crashing down. So ice and snow can be, very substantial.
Yeah, and we have during winter times, for example, in some operational plants, they have process in place to be controlling. Because remember, to keep a piping hot, they use a lot of steam and that kind of thing. So any leakage of a steam is provoked like a huge icicles of, and they are really risky. That is so true, Andy. Thank you.
And we're going to close this poll now. We've got about 70% of the field reporting in, so those results should be up. But the top voted on was tools and equipment at 67%, followed by parts and materials 18%, ice and snow at 14%, plants at one person, 2%, and nobody voted furniture.
Yeah, so anyway, that is really interesting, and I was expecting that was the answer, because normally what I was saying when I was doing presentations to my organizations and leaders around my organization, anytime we were talking about drop object, they think, oh, people dropping tools. That is immediately what people think, but that is not the case. If we don't have the capability to be collecting data, sometimes we can be taking wrong actions. And you can show the graphic now. So basically, as per WCB, the source that bring more problems to during these incidents are being parts and materials. So in my case, in my organization, there are no tools as well. It's being something that is being dropped because vibration, corrosion, so on, fixed equipment, like a part of the equipment that is being dropped. So again, it is important to have this information available, because if not, we can be taking wrong actions and providing wrong recommendation. But again, in order for you guys to provide the proper recommendation, you have to have data. So that is one of the recommendations, and that's why we are going to be working really hard into the DROPS Canadian chapter to have together that information available for you. The next one, please. So, what is the top body part being injured by count from drop objects in WCB data in Alberta? So you can answer the full question as well.
And just a comment from the field here, Jose. Ernest mentioned when he selected tools and equipment, he was thinking about a drop from height, not necessarily off his workbench. So, yeah. And then a follow up: have you been able to access any of this data through the OHS-based report on PSI?
Yeah, we are going to provide that information later on today. Yes.
And just a quick aside, that PSI report is available up on the Energy Safety Canada website now. So 65% of the field is reporting in. We'll give that another couple of seconds, folks, to get your answers in. Sorry, Jose, I think I cut you off.
No, it's okay.
All right, we're closing in on 75%. Another couple of seconds, and we'll close this out. A little more diverse here in our answers, and we'll put that up. The head, 44% is the leading thought, followed by arms and hands at 35%, and then legs and feet at 9%, neck 7%, and the trunk of the body 5% of the field.
Yeah, and again, that is really interesting. And also, I answered this question wrong. We were teasing when we were putting this presentation together. And normally, when you talk about drop objects being more about the head, but it's not. The lower extremities is the most, and again, that is according to WCB data provided to Energy Safety Canada. So as you can see, the lower extremities and upper extremities are the ones more like a frequently injured. And about, as per WCB provide data. So head is only 18% of the cases, but nevertheless, we have we don't have, we can be exposed depending on the activity we are going to be developing or doing, any activity we are progressing. So we can have this kind of injuries, protecting our body, and hazard analysis and those kind of situations will be protecting us. Okay, and then next slide, please. Next. Okay, so we were talking about PSI. So now we know OHS is collecting PSIs in Alberta. So a PSI, it is any event where is reasonable and informed person will determine that under slightly different circumstances, there will be a high likelihood for a serious injury to a person. In some cases, OHS is calling PSI. We in an organization called CIF, another organization calling different names, but basically the objective of this is to the evaluations of incident having the potential to serious injure or having being involved in a fatality. So basically that is the the way we are collecting data, programs in place. As you can see below, those are the resources Energy Safety Canada have available. Like it is a PSI guideline, and there is a PSI program that is applicable for every jurisdiction. And Energy Safety Canada have an agreement with OH&S, OH&S to provide data. And the data we are going to be showing next, it is from the Q1 2019 to Q3 to 2020. Next slide, please. And as you can see, after the PSI report, yeah, next one. So basically, that is an information on what is important to be collecting PSIs. But I would like to go to the graphic, please. Next one. Okay, so as you can see in this graphic, struck by falling objects, it is the main category, like under PSIs. So it is really interesting that almost half of those incidents as PSIs data provide for OH&S are related to line of fire events. And as you know, Energy Safety Canada have also a line of fire program, and we have some also the Life 7 rules that will be ruling these recommendations. But again, it is really, really important to see how many incidents we have related with drop objects and struck by potential to be struck. And again, the graphic below support what we were saying, as you know, what is the main category for falling objects and its other kind of situation. As you can see in the graphic, hand tools and no power tools are lower than the other one. So anyway, that is information we have right now. So I'm going to be passing. We are going to be collecting a question from you guys, and we are going to be answering later on today. But again, I'm really excited because providing these, these kind of learnings and provide this data, we can work together because we will learn from your organization as well and see how we can prevent injuries for drop objects. That's why it's really important for you guys to be part of the candidate chapter. So I don't want to take more time, and so I'm going to pass to Alan from Drops Global.
Thanks, Jose, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to present. I've worked with Robert on establishing links with Canada, and it's great to be able to be part of this launch. I noticed the introduction from Andrew. You mentioned the word expert. As an individual that's been involved in drops for nearly 23 years, I can assure you that I learn something new every day. It's a subject matter that we continually need to work together to become experts as a team. That's one of the principles of drops. The underlying principle, of course, within drops is that through a membership, through open collaboration, sharing and learning together, we can kind of pick the best from each other's systems, work towards a standard. Drops can provide that. We've got a consensus of opinion from across the industry, and all of this material is available for you to consume and exploit. So my presentation is more about what's available through drops. So I have actually got my own presentation, and hopefully if I click the buttons correctly, you should now see a drops slide. I see some nodding, excellent. So first of all, the identity drops, the Dropped Objects Prevention Scheme, that's what it stands for. Although we might use drops as a term to describe the hazard itself, remember that drops is about that scheme, a membership-driven initiative, a clear objective. This is what we want to achieve. We want to eliminate the injury and the damage that's caused by dropped objects. But the second point for me is one of the most important, and hopefully that can kind of tie into some of those safety moments that Abby shared. How can we get to a point where we've got a second nature prevention strategy? How can we make everybody aware of what that means, what to look for, what to appreciate when it comes to, as I saw popping up there, the appreciation of gravity as a hazard at the work site, just like temperature, just like motion, just like pressure, just like movement, just like noise. Yeah, all of these things, remember, we can isolate, we can switch off. Gravity is a constant in every activity at every work site. So we have all of the material we need. I've gone back a slide, there we are. So we've got all the material that we need. We've got best practice, we've got recommendations, we've got great controls, all readily adaptable. We've got commitment from the industry. We've got policies that are actually developed based on DROPS best practice. And we've got a host of resources that's available for you to make use of. DROPS membership, it's a great slide to show, but what this really wants to show is it's more than just a group of organizations that want to kind of have a DROPS badge associated or an association. It's way more than that. It's a commitment to sharing. It's a commitment to obviously fund and drive this initiative, but to represent your organization at chapters and at a global level. Around the world, we've got a number of chapters. You can explore them on the website, but the principle here is, and this is what we hope to establish in Canada, is that through DROPS Global and those regional chapters, that we have these established committees driven by the operators, so that we can all be talking under the banner of DROPS about the real issues at the work site, regionally, locally, and then start involving the supply chain. So we can start to add influence and ensure that, you know, out of the full scope of our activities from design to decommissioning, we all know what we're trying to achieve. One of the best elements, I think, of DROPS chapters is that we can deliver products, we can deliver tools, usable tools at the work site. We're hoping this is going to be available through the likes of Energy Safety Canada and then ultimately through the DROPS website, so the rest of the world can share that too. And that's the whole principle here. Free, open sharing, so everybody can use a common set of resources. We have a common approach. We have a number of kind of highly visual materials, worksite tools, but we also have a fantastic document that sets out recommended practice. It's sitting at revision 2 at the moment. I urge you to download this from the website and read through it. We have recommended that DROPS Canada use this as a template to produce a regional standard that you can all work to. But there's some really good stuff in here. And again, going back to what Abby was highlighting previously, key things like human performance, how we can kind of introduce these new concepts, understand the kind of the situations that we put people in, gap assessments, other tools, and within this document, a number of links to a variety of components. Remember that this is only a guide, it's a recommended guide, and you will find a number of the operators and drilling contractors use this as a kind of a template. Below, we find a whole host of DROPS resources. Things like, probably things that you know already, DROPS calculators, the DROPS training materials, the concepts around red zones and drop zones, and then more importantly, things like DROPS survey and inspection. Some key controls there. But reliable securing is the one I want to focus on because this is the one that we want to promote. It's the one we want you to get involved in as we continually update and review this. Within reliable securing, we've got a host of functional recommendations. Not only does it cover the kind of the nuts and bolts and screws, it also gives us good risk assessment guidance. And again, that goes back to things like highlighting the definitions, highlighting the fact that gravity is a hazard, highlighting the fact that we need to consider all these factors before we start the task, highlighting the need to walk through the task and identify where our DROPS exposure is, and then using the various examples within that booklet to determine what kind of controls are required. A free download, brilliant, like everything else. Like our DROPS calculator, it gets used by many industries. There's an example here of how you'll use it as an awareness tool. That's what it's designed for. Before they start work, everybody at this work site picks up a picture of the tool they're going to be using. They pop it on the board, on the magnetic board, as a reminder of the height they're going to be working at and what would happen or what could happen if that tool was to be dropped. That's just, if you can see me walking about, that's just my environmental switch on the light there. Again, awareness, some great tools, how we combine that tool within the principles of working at height. And again, as you can see here, how we bring in things, as Jose was highlighting, the understanding of the static and the dynamic factors. Gravity's there, but now it's gravity plus other forces. What are those forces? Are they people? Is it motion? Is it the wind? Getting to realistically identify with these things and how that could affect your work at height, your tools, your equipment, and what you are on your work site. Of course, we focus on tools at height. Within DROPS, we've established a systematic approach. We've learned from other industries. We promote the use of tools specifically designed for use at height, and we would urge you to explore that in a bit more detail. We've certainly got some great success stories of working with the tooling manufacturers, and they have managed to produce tools that are suitable for our industry. And I'll talk about our industry, I'm talking about oil and gas, particularly upstream in harsh environments. What I'm suggesting is it's not the case that we're recommending you go and get some lanyards and you put them on your tools. No, it's to take a holistic approach here. What are the tools that you're using? Are they suitable themselves? Before we then start determining what kind of safety securing devices we need. And again, that systematic approach, the concept of recording what we're taking, which starts with, of course, that kind of lean working environment approach. What do we need? What are we going to take with us? How are we recording it? How are we managing it? It's pretty straightforward when you think about it. And all of that guidance is there. The greater awareness, how we can help with toolbox talks, prompt cards, posters. We've got plenty of that too. Plenty of kind of little tip sheets, plenty of awareness materials that cover a whole variety. And actually these are extracted from Reliable Securing. The most latest one, of course, a focus on dynamic dropped objects. The key considerations around the forces and understanding of the forces, how these forces can work in our favor and how they can work against us. An appreciation of how these forces affect our equipment and our tasks. The survey and the inspection, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Without that definition, without the understanding of the hazard, we can't start applying that fantastic principle of the hierarchy of control. The idea that we can readily identify with the hazard because we understand it. And then the assessment, what are the hazards and how are we going to respond? Elimination, substitution, and control, particularly engineered controls. Providing visual guides, providing information that we can continually revisit to do our routine inspections, totally focused on drops. What are the fixtures and fittings? What needs to be inspected? And then also the ability to use that concept in any working environment, because we will have mandatory requirements for picture books and surveys, but we've also got more information that helps with a lot of other worksite inspections, checklists, you name it, all available to download, to adapt, to change, and to make work for your environment. Reliable Securing is a great training aid too. Make use of it. It's a PDF. As you can see here, I've used it as a slide. You could print it out, you can make posters from it. But there are some key things within it I want to focus on. The drops definitions, the ones that, again, if you go back to those safety moments, the key things that failed, or the last line of defense was an engineered control. Once that's removed, gravity takes over. It's almost that kind of principle, working back on that and thinking, what is the method of retaining or controlling this stored energy? What's the primary fixing? What prevents things from falling? And what's the secondary retention? Particularly if we're going to shake it about or expose it to continuous dynamic forces, an understanding of what these are, but in a lot more detail. And then, of course, as you'd probably be well aware of, is how can we then respond to that risk with a safety securing device, a mitigating measure. So without going into more detail, too much detail there, it's worth exploring the book because that's how the book is put together. A focus on secondary retention, an understanding, based on an understanding of what fixings are doing and how they work, how they operate, even down to the finer detail of things like split pins and their importance. And then, of course, if you work through that whole booklet, you will see continual reference to safety securing devices. Another great example here of a product developed by a company called DropSafe, who are continually revisiting this product and responding to the industry's needs. Fantastic products. And if you read how they're kind of positioned within the Drops book, it's about how to make sure you are understanding the risk that you're responding to, helping you through that. It goes beyond. It goes beyond just the equipment. It goes beyond into the full life cycle, into the supply chain. The same principles apply. And how do we translate that into things like our pre-lift inspections, into our transportation inspections, the backloading principle, when we send things back. Again, great guides, very pictorial, great stuff, great awareness to help you identify with what to look for. I don't recommend that it's just a generic checklist. Everything is specific, an understanding of what it is you're looking at, how it is going to be used, what it's going to be exposed to throughout that full supply chain, from start to finish, an appreciation of where our Drops exposure is. What we're asking you all to do, of course, is quite simply get involved. Yeah, that's what it says here. I don't know if you can see me on the screen at all, but that's what it says. Get involved. It's the way that Drops works. We all get involved. If we can all help raise awareness and share this material, we're all going to finally get onto the same page. Exploit this material. Make sure you're using it in the task risk assessment. I urge you to explore that risk, that recommended practice, particularly things like the human performance element. That taking the time to walk through and talk through the task, identify where your Drops exposure is, as well as all the other hazards. Make it specific. And just if you're working at height or we're using equipment at height, it's not a generic response as in there's bound to be dropped objects today, so let's put up barricades, get some lanyards out. It's a lot more detail. It has to be realistic. It has to be based on the realistic hazards at the work site. That kind of second from the bottom point is the one that I continually reiterate, and it's the one that I find the most interesting. Every single thing that you look at, every piece of equipment that you use, even the little latch on the sliding component that then locked another feature in place, how is it secured? Question the robustness of it. What are the securing devices for? Is it to make it easy for maintenance? And how will those fittings react when we start to operate? What if there's damage? What if there's more vibration than we'd anticipated? It's to question the robustness of our fixtures and fittings in everything that we do. And again, that's where I would say is our second nature prevention strategy. Keep Drops at the forefront of the business. Realize that it has a benefit, not just in safety, but integrity too. We secure things at height. We suspend things at height. We use gravity a lot, actually, when we lift things. Make sure that we've covered all angles, making sure that we've applied Drops principles and best practice. Probably the first time I've kind of completed well within time allocated. And again, as Andrew said, there's opportunity for questions later. And again, through Drops Online, you've got contact with us, you've got access to all of this material. If you want to explore it, if you want to know more about Drops, again, through Energy Safety Canada, you've now got that conduit back to us. And through us, we can share what you do with the rest of the world. I thank you so much for taking the time to join in today. And I appreciate the opportunity to kind of speak about Drops. I'm passionate. It's tattooed on my chest. I believe in this, and I hope you guys too. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Alan. It is really nice, and seeing all the passion and being following, all the work you guys have been doing since long time helped me a lot as during my professional career about safety and providing recommendations. And that is the objective of this. I'm really happy, honestly, and to be having this Canadian chapter because it's giving us a good opportunity to share information and share that passion that Alan is saying. Everybody into this group, and we're inviting you as well, to be sharing that passion to prevent incidents and prevent drop subject. It is something, and when I was looking into information through the websites and internet to see and learning other than drops, it is amazing how much information we found about, fatalities and how many incidents and statistics for different countries related with dropout. I believe it's enough. I believe we have a good opportunity to, to be learning together and, doing something. I agree when Alan said we are no experts, but we are passion people, safety professionals getting together, having, an idea on how we can prevent incidents to bring people back home. That is our main objective. And through Energy Safety Canada, we are able to do it, like, using the resources and using, of course, the connection with drops. We are having these, chapter that is going to be helping and aligning and learning together through in Canada. And through Canada and through this chapter, you are going to be sharing also information to the rest of the world. So now I'm going to be providing information about the term of reference of the Canadian chapter. Go to the next slide, please. So basically, as Alan already said, that is the mandate for drops. In our case, the purpose of the Canadian chapter is to facilitate the ongoing advancement of the prevention of dropout through industry. So in some cases, sometimes you are looking information and it is a lot of drilling information and overseas, offshore information about, drops prevention and everything. And in some cases, some people feel, oh, but there is not enough information about my kind of work. All recommendations can align and can be used, but we want to hear it for you. What is your main concern? What is your learning? What is your main objective, or what information you're looking for? Maybe we have it. If we don't have it, we can work together to find that information. And I, for sure, Alan will be helping us to find some information about if available. If not, for sure, he will be helping us to find that information as well and provide the best recommendation we can provide. So the Canadian chapter will provide a forum for a multi-sector discussion of the hazard of dropout. It's not only we are representing, the majority of this panel is representing, the oil and gas industry, but we are going to be receiving information for other kind of the industry when we can provide some recommendations and helping to having a proper drops object program or prevention program. The scope of the Canadian chapter include the following: the holding Canadian chapter meetings. And I will say this is, I'm being working with Abby, Robert, myself in different working groups. That is too serious right now. That is not the way. We have fun in what the work we do. The passion we show is also, it is kind of conversation and sharing a lot of information, a lot of ideas. Sometimes, listening and hearing from other people, you will learn. You say, well, that never think about that way. So that is the objective as well, having normal meetings where we can share the information we have available. You guys, basically, we want you guys to provide also information to us. But as Alan says, the only way we can learn together if we provide the information that what is happening. So as you say, the next one is the sharing of dropout incidents and, sorry, go back. The sharing of dropout incident and prevention best practices. So each company, and we know we have different best practices. And I know Energy Safety Canada, through this working group, we obtain a lot of information and we put in the best practice that Energy Safety Canada have available right now. But also, we would like to test that best practice as well and see if we are already using the best to prevent dropout. Maybe there are some ideas that we don't know that is going to be helping us to prevent more incidents, but that's why this is an open forum to provide that information back to us. Developing support to resources to assist industry, and Energy Safety Canada is doing a good job about that, like having the website, all the information, all the best practices. Later on today, we are going to be showing additional work we are doing through this working group. But again, that doesn't stop here. Having you guys involved is going to be helping us to provide having more available to prevent incidents related to dropout. And the last one, out of a scope, we cannot provide direction to Energy Safety Canada. Sometimes I would like to provide some direction to Robert, but he won't listen to me. No, I'm just kidding. It is a really open conversation. But again, area safety kind of have their goals, and the objective of this forum or chapter is not to provide any instruction how they are going to be conducting business energy safety Canada. Next slide. So when you become a member of the DROPS Canadian chapter, you have to commit to abiding by the code of conduct, and sometimes that is really important. Whatever chapter or whatever organization you belong, have to have a code of conduct, and we have to respect that. Be prepared for and attend all meetings, and this is really important. Sometimes we have other kind of working groups and everything, like the line of fire, and then some another kind of working groups that we are seeing people not attending those meetings, and it's really important because sharing information and having back that information, it made this team to have an objective, and also we are going to be here because we are passionate, ready to provide this information and working to prevent those kind of events. Having like a contribute to group discussion, sharing industry expertise and opinions, in an open and transparent manner. This objective is really, we have to be focused, providing and learning together. The only way, for example, in the other meetings, we can be providing more information, like some individual work by companies. What are you doing? The data you are seeing, the trending you are seeing, your specific work that is going to be helping us. When I start working in my company, collecting information internally, when I was presenting this to leaders, the first question they ask, what about the other companies? What are they doing? Are they having the same issues? Are they taking the same controls? So having this working group together is going to be helping to answer those questions when you guys are going to be presenting the same to your own organizations. Demonstrate critical judgment when making recommendations. Recommend best practice and resources for review and consideration. Report regularly with a stakeholder they represent. So it is not only you guys attending this chapter, it's also taking this information back to your organization. So we can be sharing this learning. It's not only individual learning, it's going to be like an organizational learning. Complete assigned tasks and action items we know, and we have in this working group. We also have our own individual responsibilities, but we provide time. And when we are committed to provide any report or any work being assigned through this group, we have to complete it. So and take an active role. So being an ambassador for DROPS prevention, we can help you with that. We have the information available. And again, as I said previously, we don't have the information, we will find it for you. So the next one. Next slide. There you go. So as Alan said, we have now information available through the DROPS online. We have the information about the DROPS Canada chapter, and where we are going to be posting as the other chapters, we were going to be sharing information through this website, but also for contact information you have below, and to sign in, you will have it through that tool, right, Robert? That is the way they can sign in to be members of the group.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, if you go to the Energy Safety Canada website, it actually directs you to this website as well. Yeah. So at the bottom of Energy Safety Canada for dropped objects, it'll point you to here. And then if you go here, it gives you the contact information. You just basically send an email to that contact information, and then we'll get you set up access to a SharePoint site, as well as looking at the terms of reference, code of conduct, and then you'll be on the invitation list for subsequent meetings.
Yep. So please, we invited you to go to that site and sign in for more information and to be participant of the meeting and helping us to having and be preventing DROPS incidents. So I believe the next on the agenda, next one, we have a break. Let's take 10 minutes. It's 10 o'clock, so we can go back 10:10. That is okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, see you guys in a bit.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much. I hope everyone is back in attendance. We are going to resume our presentation for today, and it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Mr. Robert Waterhouse.
Hey there. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Robert.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. So we're going to start right off here with a poll. So when I think of dropped objects, the first thing that comes to mind is, and the way this question is set up is you have a series of sub-questions. So you're going to answer the top one first. So out of this list, what is the top thing that comes to mind? And then if you scroll down, you'll see it asks the question again as the second, and then ultimately, what is the last? The last question is, what is the last thing you think of? In other words, the thing that is the most remote from your mind as it relates to dropped objects. So if folks can take a few minutes and answer those questions, and let's see what we see.
And there are a number of answers there, but they're the same answers for every question. So people are going to have to read through, kind of get familiar, and see well what really best fits with my initial thoughts. So. And I'm not sure we've got everybody back from the break there, Robert. So this might take another minute or two. We've got about a quarter of the field reporting in, though. And I don't want to spoil the surprise for those who are going to do take up a minute or two to get to that. So I'm not going to give an update on this one. We do have about half the field reporting in, so we'll give that another minute here. About 58% reporting in. I'm going to give people another 10 seconds and then we'll move on. All right, I think we're going to close that out now just for the sake of expediency. So we are sharing these results. The first thing that people tend to think about, Robert, it seems to be working at height, 50%. Second is human error, 22, followed by drilling activities at number 3. And now the next thing that comes to mind is a little more of a split. 47% think workers and hand tools, followed by working at height by 14%, and then human error, 11% of those who reported in. And the last thing that people would think about when considering working at height would be dangerous trees, 33%, followed by corroded fasteners at 14, and then a tie for 11, that offshore activities and human error.
Yeah, interesting. It's certainly, when you look at even the WCB data, and we didn't show that just in the interest of time, but if you slice that data, looking at it from a cost perspective or a lost time perspective, you will actually see logs actually, rank up in the top 3, for example, because when you get hit with a tree or a plant, like a big, tree basically falls on you, that's either going to result in a very serious injury or a fatality. There's not a lot of margin for error there. And then we also see actually icicles and things like that ranking high when it comes to, in the top 3 when it comes to lost time and costs as well. And yet, that's not something that people are thinking too much about. So certainly, and then the people's traditional views on sort of working at height and that type of stuff. So we really sort of, when we look at the data, when we look at PSI data, when we look at Jose's experiences, within his company. It certainly, you know, all of these things are telling us that we have some preconceived notions about what dropped objects are that actually are not reflected in the data, whether that be PSI data, whether that be in your own experiences, or whether that be WCB injury data. So it certainly, you know, points to the fact that we need to rethink this because we are askew from what's actually really happening in the workplace. Thanks, Sandy. Appreciate that.
And then just a comment here, Robert. James has mentioned that they look at dropped objects and how they might cause service quality events or interruptions, and that drives that conversation on potential loss and the opportunities for improvement as well.
Absolutely. And when we look at companies, you know, non-productive time, especially in the challenges that we're having as an industry, I mean, just not a lot of room for that. Let's be honest. You know, and when we talked to a lot of companies when we started down this journey a year and a half or thereabouts ago, one of the things that we heard from several companies is that they have well-established drops programs. They're doing a really good job of managing, you know, their issues. I mean, everyone has challenges, but you know, they felt they were reasonably well in hand. Some of the issues they were having were actually from other people, other service providers that they had to work alongside, and that they themselves did not have drops programs, and that their dropped objects were actually hurting and impeding their production, you know, non-productive time, you know, injuries of their workers and their operations. And so that just speaks to the fact that we all need to be pulling in the same direction in order to be successful in this space. So dropped objects, you know, existing focus, you know, to date, the focus, you know, primarily when we look at, you know, people's responses here tends to be certainly offshore, and that tends to be, you know, pretty much a whole range of different objects, drilling, similar, and then construction, which tends to be tools. Um, kind of moved around a little bit here. So we created a best practice. One of the reasons we did this was to, you know, in conjunction with, you know, the PSI data, we were seeing some of the preliminary data and seeing where it was going. And that was a good fit, given that it's a top PSI. We wanted to elevate the prevention of dropped objects throughout the Canadian onshore oil and gas industry, and we felt this was a good way to kind of ramp that up a little bit. You know, we wanted to also leverage existing control strategies by drops and others, and certainly, you know, having this Canadian chapter is a big part of that. And if you look at our document, it's basically, you know, includes other things, but it's heavily pointing towards, you know, the drops online resources that are available, right? So, and then we wanted to align with existing programs and standards like life-saving rules, for example, and bridge that connection, because there's basically, you know, several life-saving rules that relate to this. We also have the line of fire program as well, which is Abby had mentioned as well. Certainly, if you haven't had a look at that, go on our website and take a look at it. You can sign up for that as well and get access to a whole bunch more resources as well. Obviously, like life-saving rules, we have the line of fire life-saving rule that references dropped objects, and we also have the working at height life-saving rule that references dropped objects. And so those are, you know, pretty key, and that's a standard that has been put in place within Energy Safety Canada, you know, working in concert with IOGP, and trying to drive standardization and get everyone sort of pulling in the same direction. Alan had obviously mentioned the drops calculator as well as others. This is a key resource to understanding dropped objects, and particularly understanding the injury potential with dropped objects, which tends to be where some of the challenges lie, where people look at it and say, well, I don't really see any big deal with this bolt. What's the big deal if it drops? And it's like they just don't understand, you know, the significance of gravity and acceleration and what happens to that object from a force and energy perspective when it gets to the ground, if you happen to be there or someone else is there. So I still do talk to people in industry that are unfamiliar with the drops calculator, which I've kind of find completely surprising. So there's still work to be done on that, around raising awareness on that, and it's definitely an awesome resource that the folks need to use. It needs to be used a little bit more preventative, though. I find a lot of people will use it certainly for like evaluating a PSI and whether or not there was enough energy to cause a serious injury, and that's good. But it would be nice to see more use and uptake of this resource from a preventative perspective. Thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, so we're going to put this object here, we're going to put this bolt here. You know, thinking about, well, where is it? Is there a dropped hazard potential that's being created with that bolt? Do we need a variety of the things that Alan was talking about around, you know, safety securing and just reliable securing as a general category? You know, if it's 6 inches off the ground, then probably not. But if you have it up overhead at a decent height, then you know then that's something you probably should be thinking about. And the drops calculator can really help with that, so that you can look in and say, well, what could happen if this falls? You know, how much sort of hazard, you know, energy potential is here, and as far as injury potential. So if you're not familiar with this, obviously, I suspect probably everyone on the call is. The challenge here is getting the folks that aren't at the table, and that's one of the things we wanted to do with the Canadian chapter as well, is really get at a lot of the folks that aren't involved in this, either because, you know, I've certainly heard comments, people like, well, we don't do drilling, so why would that appeal to us, or we're not offshore, or and the reality is, when you look at the data, and we didn't show that here, but you do see that dropped objects pretty much spans the vast majority of our industry sectors, within oil and gas. So it's not something that is just drilling. You know, certainly you can see lots of construction, lots of drilling, but all the other sectors are there as well. And so this is something that that spans the whole industry.
Robert, just a quick question.
Yep.
A question from the room here. Is there a way to modify that calculator beyond that maximum height of 15 meters? They can't seem to get populated results past that range.
That's a good question. I know on the drop site, there's a couple different versions that are available. Let me, Alan, go ahead.
Bear in mind what you said as well there, Robert, that the original principle behind the calculator was to give a kind of a better idea of what the consequences could be if you're particularly if you're handling materials or tools at height. The XL version of it, the graphic only goes to 15 meters, but the actual calculator itself continues to as high as you like. You just need to click and say, yeah, I'm happy just to continue without the graphic. So that's the only limitation to the XL version. But you know, we do promote the use of the card calculators, which you can download, the kind of the hard copy, so that you've got one in your pocket. And there's also one that on an iPhone app, which does the same thing. It's called Drop Hurt Calc, CALC, which is free. I believe ExxonMobil actually put that together. And again, same principle applies. It's to give you an idea of what kind of stored energy you're playing with. So yeah, you can go, the calculator does go beyond 15 meters. It's just the graphic stops at 15 meters on the XL version.
Cool, thanks, Alan.
Yeah.
One thing just to mention.
Sorry, so in the direct answer is if there's anybody on that can understand the inner workings of that XL and how it works with that graphic, you know, brilliant. If somebody within the group is an Excel wizard that can make that graphic work exponentially, even better. You know, that would be great. We could share it with everybody. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a pretty good Excel wizard myself, but finding time might be the challenge. But so whether, you know, when we think about consequences, a lot of people just tend to think about, injury. Obviously, that's forefront in our mind. But I did want to, relate the fact that, there's, you heard Jose mention it, earlier on when we were talking about definition, dropped objects make reference to process safety incidents or events. And, this is a great example. This is something that's available on Netflix. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly encourage you to go do it. It would make a great sort of maybe team building exercise for folks as far as a company, or just to watch yourself. But this is a real life event where in the 1980 there was a ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead on the top of it that workers were basically doing some work, and they dropped a socket, and it actually fell down the length of the missile and bounced off of the ground and penetrated the side and ruptured one of the fuel sort of containments, and it ultimately blew up. And a really good example of, people were like, well, you can think about this for yourself, right? I mean, it's not hugely prevalent within our industry, but you could certainly drop something and damage something, like instrumentation lines, for example, small bore piping, where you could, end up with a rupture that cascades into, creating a more serious incident somewhere else in your facility, or, certainly top drive off of a drilling rig falls down and compromise the wellhead for sure. And then also thinking about static electricity as well, because when you drop things, you can create sources of ignition as well. And so you're introducing that into your workplace as well. So I just wanted to get people aware of this. If you haven't watched this video and you're a safety professional, you're interested in dropped objects or other, go do so, because it's amazing. It's a real life event. They talk to the real guys, the people that survived, obviously not the ones that didn't, and they go through what happened, and there's an immense amount of learnings in there. It's like a classic incident with 1,000 different things that happened on one day that went wrong, right? So when we talk about risk factors in our document, we do talk about things like activities and working at height or below grade, mechanical lifting, line of fire. We also talk about things like vibration, transportation, equipment that's being moved around, what type of work you're doing there, even things like earthquakes, for example. Right now we're probably all sitting in our home office somewhere. I mean, you can look up and you can see a light, and certainly, we could say, well, where's your reliable securing on that light? And in a perfect world, that would certainly, might be something to do. But the reality is from a risk perspective, hopefully your house isn't moving around too much, and you're not exposing the inside of your house to a whole bunch of corrosion and other factors. However, if you lived in an earthquake zone, that's something worth considering, right? I mean, there's places in our world where earthquakes are much more common, and if you go into those places in the world, they actually do a lot of that stuff, because otherwise people get hit with stuff when it falls off the ceiling, right? When they have an earthquake, and so we need to be thinking about this risk-based way in our operations, particularly as we move these concepts into other sectors of the industry, because certainly the risk profile can be very different, and the application of very like-minded thinking might be appropriate, but in some instances it might not as well. And so that's an important concept. I've certainly seen people that have sort of said, well, I'm going to, treat this plant like it's a drilling rig, and I'm going to do all these different things. And it's like, well, okay, but does that actually make sense? Anyway, so wanted to belabor the point too much, just other than to talk about a little bit of a few of these. Certainly, we've talked about ice and snow and outdoor elements. Weather is certainly a big factor. Equipment, as far as if you have limited access to it, you've got a big light stand that it requires sort of high angle rope type people to folks to get up there and change the light bulb. So how often are you doing inspections on that? Well, maybe from the ground with the binoculars, maybe. There's certainly some challenges there, temporary third-party equipment, foreign objects and things that, a lot of times people just leave something on a piece of equipment, think, we don't need it anymore. It's just a bracket, it's sitting up there. But the problem is that no one looks at it. Eventually it gets corroded, and one day it falls off and maybe seriously injures someone or kills someone. And why is it there, right? I mean, that ties back to management of change, and then the last piece would be occupancy, looking at density and frequency of personnel. Certainly, when you look at the drill floor as an example, there's tripping pipe and stuff. There's times where you don't want to minimize the amount of people that are on the floor, cut back on their time as much as possible. And when you're thinking about all these risks, certainly if you have an area that's very densely populated with lots of people and they're there on an ongoing basis, that creates more risks if something falls than if you have something that's 1 hour of 1 week, someone shows up and does something and then moves on, right? So just things to think about. So we have a poll question here under the category of deliberate learning. So a worker fumbles a bolt just as she removes it from a piece of overhead equipment that is not working. The bolt falls 20 meters below and almost hits some workers. How can this be prevented? Select one that a worker can control. So Andy, if you want to pop that up, keep in mind, I want you to pick one control, and it has to be something that the worker has control over.
All right, there the results are starting to roll in. About 40% of the field reporting. 50, we'll give that another 15 seconds or so. All right, a lot of agreement in this poll, Robert. Give that another 67% of our audience today is reporting in, and 72% said establish an exclusion zone. And then tied for second and third with use tool tethers, and no selections for any of the other options.
Nice. Yeah, there's a few sort of more provocative ones in there. Yeah, exclusion zone is something that's definitely possible. Tool tethers, there certainly is magnetic equipment. I mean, we're dealing with a bolt, so you can't really tether a bolt. You could be using a ratchet and socket, that is magnetic that would hold a bolt. Work materials like bolts and things like that are tough ones from a tethering perspective. It's not to say it's impossible; it's more challenging. So yeah, good to see. So I want to just move to the next question. We're going to ask the same question, but we're going to do it from a management perspective. So same question, a worker fumbles a bolt just as she removes it from a piece of overhead equipment that is not working. The bolt falls 20 meters below and has almost hit some workers. How can this be prevented? Select one that management controls. So provide tool tethers, discipline worker, exclusion zone program, retrain worker on hazards, revise health and safety policy, improve hiring practices, enforce fit for duty rule, or leadership training.
And just while we wait for some results there, we do have a comment in the chat. We created something for our facilities that we call FISH, falling ice and snow hazard, to identify those places where ice and snow tend to accumulate. And you know what? That's from Jeff. That sounds like a great program and practice to share with the Drops Canadian chapter.
Absolutely.
And we'll leave that up for another 10 seconds or so. 56% of the field reporting in, Robert.
Perfect.
And then Ruben has just posted a link, interesting way to contain bolts and small parts from neverletgo.com. So good sharing. We do appreciate that, Ruben. All right, we're going to end the polling there. And exclusion zone program came in at number 1, but a lot more diverse answers here. 8%, 5% provide tool tethers, discipline worker, retrain on hazards, revise H&S policy, and improve hiring practices. All getting votes. Nobody did vote for the fit for duty rule though. So.
Well, thanks, Andy. Yeah, and so if you think about this, I mean, the reality is that people are going to fail. Having a worker drop a bolt is basically to be expected. It's just a question of time. Some of that goes back to the focus of the worker on the job at the time, and what's going on in their head, and 1,000 other things. Certainly, exclusion zone program would be probably the better answer for sure. Retrain worker on hazards. The worker's probably well aware of the hazards. If I was to explain to you, say, this situation, that it turns out that the worker actually went and had a conversation with his manager who's the plant manager, and the plant manager actually told him to get the work done because the maintenance crew didn't have time to do it. And the maintenance crew was actually the workers working below, and were informed that in order for them to do that work, they needed, for this worker to do that work, they needed to not be there. And the maintenance manager and the plant manager are not communicating well, and don't generally like each other. It leaves the worker in a very difficult situation. And and that's the context of some of these things. When you see a basic thing like this, you think, oh well, the worker isn't doing, maybe they don't understand the hazards. Well, in this particular instance, the worker understands the hazards very well. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place, between two managers that work in the plant that aren't communicating and aren't working together, and they're leaving that worker in a difficult spot. And when you sort of look at that, you go, well, actually, the management probably needs to take leadership training. The worker themselves can probably, refuse work or do a bunch of other things and try to bridge that. But I mean, we often expect a lot of our workers, and sometimes, frankly, too much, to be quite frank. So basically, this sort of ties into human organizational performance, thinking about, Todd Conklin, 5 principles: error is normal, blame fixes nothing, learning and improving are vital. It's something you need to actually do deliberately. If you just expect your organization to learn, you probably have already learned that doesn't seem to happen, and you keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Context influences behaviors. If I tell you that story, you go, well, that's completely different. Now we got a whole different situation. Well, the challenge is very often in your organizations, these type of details don't often get shared up the ladder of the management chain. They get scrubbed out, and maybe your executive aren't hearing that story. They're just hearing that a worker needs to be retrained because they don't understand the hazards of dropped objects, when in reality that has absolutely no bearing on what's actually why the incident occurred. And how you respond to failure matters. So how leaders act and respond counts. If the response is we're going to discipline that worker or fire that worker, then what does that look like going forward for other people? And do people actually put incidents in, or do they decide to stop reporting because it's safer to do that because they're worried about losing their job? If your response is basically yelling at people, you're not going to get very far very very quickly. So capacity to fail safely. So understanding the quality of safeguards and vulnerabilities is really ties well and nicely with human error. Planning for failure. And this is something I couldn't reinforce enough, but the reality is if you don't have a plan for what's going to happen to that object up there, in relation to keeping it from falling, if it's just, well, it's fine, if there's a problem, we'll deal with it, well, then there will be a problem, and you will have a dropped object. So you need to have preventative maintenance, you need to have inspection programs, you need a variety of things in place, under the assumption that eventually things will fall off and be dropped. And this is well aligned with the bow tie methodology that looks at threats and consequences. So this is what we have in our best practices, just an example of a bow tie in relation to dropped objects, where people can, basically, think about. Most people are probably somewhat familiar with bow ties, but maybe not. Certainly, when we look at quality and when we think about some of the stuff that Alan was talking about with respect to robustness of your controls, bow tie is a nice way of visually portraying that. The less barriers you have between the center of the event of the dropped object and the thread on the left, the more vulnerable you are. And of course, the quality of these barriers really matters. I mean, if some of them are something that 10% of our workers do 10% of the time, then it's not actually worth anything. You might as well just remove it from your bow tie, because it's actually a barrier that doesn't count, if you will. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. Just to say, to be thinking about the quality of the barriers that you have in place currently within your own operations, and whether or not they're actually robust, like Alan said. So I think at this point, I'm going to transition over to talking about the exclusion zone tool. So this tool was developed because serious incidents occur outside of exclusion zones from deflections. Industries are highly reliant on exclusion zones in many instances and does not always understand the vulnerability in relation to deflections. Existing exclusion zones are often inadequate in relation to deflections, and in many cases are not risk-based. So often based on what work environment will allow is what people will do. You know, they'll look at it and say, well, how much space do we have that's not going to impact some other activity on site? Yeah, put the barricades there. That looks good, a couple feet away or whatever the case might be. Is, you know, certainly not necessarily, I would say, common, but certainly in the absence of direction from, you know, a company, as far as a program, workers will sort of, you know, default to, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know. What can we do? What seems reasonable? How much banner tape do you have? And based on rules of thumb is something else that is done commonly. You know, one that you'll see in the drops program, which is really good, is the cone of exposure. And that tends to be more like sort of thinking about like a 1-to-1. If you go up 10 feet, you go out 10 feet. And then the other is the ladder rule, which is the 4-to-1. Which is, you know, for every 4 feet you go up, you go 1 feet out. That's another one that's commonly used. And then there's discrete distances. So some companies will sort of say like, hey, you know what, 10 feet out is sort of what we want to see our exclusion zone, or 3 meters, for example. And so I wanted to do a poll question and just get a sense of what strategy does your company use to dictate the size of exclusion zones. So I get a couple options there. We let operations decide. Cone of exposure, or the 1-to-1, the ladder rule, 4-to-1, or discrete distance, which could be, you know, like 10 feet or whatever the case might be, or unknown.
Just while we're letting people discuss that, Robert, just throw back to that bow tie concept. If anyone out there in the audience does want some more information on that, please do reach out to Energy Safety Canada, myself or Robert, and we can have some discussions around how you would use that. And we actually have a license to use that particular version of the tool you saw on the screen, so we can offer some assistance there. All right, about 60% reporting in. We'll give it another 10 seconds here or so. And we do have some diverse results here. And I think we'll call it a split between letting operations decide and cone of exposure, the 1-to-1, 29% each, followed by unknown, 18%, or we're not sure. 15% of the field uses a discrete distance, and only 9%, surprising, use the ladder rule.
Yeah, and so this basically is a pretty good example of you know, why we went into this space. You know, when we say we let operations decide, I mean, that's basically like, well, we don't really know, so we'll let someone else figure it out. Hey, I get it. It's a challenge at times, right? You have to make decisions as to what space you're going to occupy, where you're going to provide advice within your organization, and what you have to offer. You know, certainly discrete distance, you know, 5 people using that, unknown. So, you know, unknown probably means that there isn't one, or there isn't any, you know, that might be the same as we let operations decide. And so that sort of illustrates the point here, right, as to why we went into this space. And so here's the next poll question. So a worker is removing some bolts from an overhead piece of equipment located 0.25 meters adjacent to a walkway that's 20 meters high. Some piping is located 5 meters above the ground beneath the equipment. Approximately what size of an exclusion zone is needed to have the capacity to handle most, but not all, deflected bolts? And you got 4 different options there: 5, 10, 20, and 40.
And Robert, I think it's worth noting, you know, this is a probability piece. It's, you know, a certain size bolt, you know, with the right mass, you know, will deflect or will bounce a little more. So,
Well, yeah, and people are aware of the tool, so that many of them are probably going in there, plugging it in, and seeing what it says.
about 50%. We'll leave that up for another 15 seconds. Let people bring up that tool and punch the numbers in. I will let the cat out of the bag early. It seems like our audience is pretty plugged in, and most of them have got the correct answer, Robert. Well, what
Yeah,
I
so
think
we're
is the correct answer.
totally, yeah. So we're approximately about 20 meters is you know, kind of where things lie there. This is the tool that's available. It is, like Andy said, it's a probability. It's actually not tied to mass. People always think that that you need the mass to determine where that object is going to go. Mass combined with acceleration will tell you force, which will give you an indication as to, if you're dealing with a really big thing, if you drop like, something huge like a car, it's not going to bounce off of anything. It's going to plow through things. If you're dropping really huge objects, you don't need to be worried about deflections. To be quite frank, you got bigger problems. You got explosion problems. For this industry, if you're dropping something that big in any of our operations. Yeah, and so I mean, gravity's a constant. It affects all objects, irrespective of mass, equally. And so it doesn't actually come into play. And it's a common thing when you see people talking about this. They always think, oh, well, the bigger the object, the farther it's going to go. And actually, there's actually no connection there. Um, the and you can certainly go on our site, on the Energy Safety Canada site, and get this tool and have a look at it. I'll just talk briefly about it here before we transition on to Abby. But a tool can be used for the following: to educate industry personnel on the risks of a deflection, focus industry to prevent the dropped object, and add other safeguards to fail safely, right? The reality is we want to prevent the dropped objects to begin with. That's on the preventative side of the bow tie. Having an exclusion zone is, okay, we've dropped an object, let's make sure it doesn't hit anyone, which is on the right hand side of the bow tie. Um, you know, if you're in an environment where you can't handle a deflection because you just don't have the space, then you probably really need to be looking really hard at what you're putting in place to prevent the dropped object from occurring in the first place. Um, so we want to create that environment where it's okay if a worker makes a mistake. I'm not saying that we want that, but we have to recognize that it is inevitable. It's going to happen, and we need to make sure that when it does happen, people don't die. So we want to create an exclusion zone that is risk-based where feasible, and we want it to work in concert with the drops calculator. The drops calculator does require mass to get the energy associated with the calculations around injury potential. So just a notation there. The limitations of the tool: the impact it's designed for impact on round surfaces. Use on angular steel may not be appropriate because it's going to really come down to the orientation of that steel. It's designed for static drops, assumes no air resistance or friction, provides a probability distribution. So if you go out and you drop one object and you go, oh, well, your tool said it was going to be this and it was this, the tool is telling you where a percentage of the objects are going to land, not where any one object is going to land. And so keep that in mind. It predicts the striking distance, not the final resting distance. So it may land there and then subsequently roll or slide along the ground or bounce along the ground farther, right? So keep that in mind. When you compare the tool against the ladder rule and against the cone of exposure, this is basically what you see. You see that certainly the ladder rule is largely underprotective. Cone of exposure is quite good, although it is biased high. So this does give you a risk-based way of addressing that. Granted, if you don't have the time to do that and you just want to use sort of the cone of exposure, that's probably the better way to go, but it may not be feasible for many of your workplaces just based on the size and distance. So the tool has been updated based on industry feedback and incorporates an energy loss component. This is called a coefficient of restitution value. Right now it's set at 0.66. Just for reference, a golf ball is 0.8. So if you drop golf balls off the side of some big plant environment, they're going to bounce farther than the tool will tell you because the tool is based on steel, not on golf balls. Margin for safety to address rotational motion has been added. Initially in the tool, if you selected imperial or metric, it didn't make a difference. It just changed the units. Now it actually does. So you do need to make sure you're in the right category because I basically evaluated and looked at, there was a bit of a vulnerability within the tool with respect to low distances that it drops from the deflection to the total height. If that distance is very tiny, then small amounts of energy, whether it be from someone saying it's static when it actually wasn't, it was actually dynamic, or there's some rotational motion, will actually influence the tool negatively from putting an air in. And so I've accounted for that. by building in some correction factors for that, as well as some data validation. So there's a few things in the tool that it forces you to do certain things, because I'm trying to prevent and build in a safety factor so that people don't use the tool in an environment that will create some increased error, if you will. What's next? We're going to publish the mathematics behind the tool in a peer-reviewed paper. And then also in that paper, I'm talking about how to actually test this tool and all the math that people need to be thinking about. And then we're also, basically asking industry, for folks to help us test this tool in real-world environments as well. So I think at that point, I should hand things over to Abby. So
Yes.
give me a sec here and I'll just share my screen.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. That has been very interesting, Alan presentation, Jose, and your own. So for people online, we want to show you a video, micro-learning, that you will also get at Energy Safety Canada's website. So let's watch the video, and after the video, we would have some kind of discussion, maybe through the chat, to tell us what you feel.
Oh, hang on, I didn't do that right. Give me a sec.
You didn't have the audio.
Yes, yeah, I have to just let me. I did not select that right thing here. Oh, I've got them selected. Yeah, we're good.
Energy Safety Canada, the National Safety Association for Canada's oil and gas industry. Struck by falling object is one of the top categories of potentially serious incidents and is included in 2 of the life-saving rules. We cannot underestimate the danger. Dropped objects are a hazard. Why? Gravity. Dropped objects often seem unexpected, unless you know what to look for. Look at this shop, for instance. I'm sure we can find examples of dropped objects. When we think of dropped objects, we often think of work being conducted at height, and often work tools being dropped. But many other items can be a drop hazard. Did you know that work materials are one of the biggest challenges? Like a bolt. If dropped from high enough, it can be deadly. You cannot tether work materials, like a bolt, so you need other safeguards, such as exclusion zones. However, often exclusion zones are not adequately sized to handle a deflection. It's not just tools and work materials that are dropped. Sometimes, like this situation, hidden hazards wait for vibration or a change in temperature to drop. That could have been serious. In the case of very heavy objects, like a section of piping, even a short distance to drop can cause serious injury and equipment damage. Take this light that's no longer used. The humidity from pressure washing has corroded the nuts that hold the lens in place. It's another hidden hazard waiting to drop. In winter, snow and ice are common, but venting from equipment and facilities can be a serious concern. These are only a few examples of where dropped objects can be found. Consider other oil and gas operations, such as processing facilities, pipelines, drilling and well servicing, seismic, and others, all have the potential for dropped objects. Wherever you are, look up and ask yourself, what could drop? See if you can find at least 3 examples at your work and take action.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. And back to our audience. This video is quite an eye-opener, and I want to just ask us through the chat that what are those three objects that you can see? He said like that conclusion. Look up and see if you can find three objects that possibly could be falling or will be falling very shortly at your work site. I know maybe you are not at the work site at this point, but just cast your mind back and see whether you can find at least three objects. So what the importance of this video is a micro learning, and we are just trying to give us the resource to start a conversation around drop objects. You have heard Alan, you have heard Jose, you have heard Robert talking about so many opportunities we have around this area. The safety moment I shared, unfortunately, we lost those two individuals. And as much as we want to have a program in place, a fatality prevention program, that should be also inclusive of these drops events or anything that can drop from height or even at grade. So the question, apart from the three objects, if you can also answer in the chats, what are your takeaways from this video? Or do you have any thoughts around anything that we can showcase around the macro learning as we launch this chapter today? So that at the end of the day, we can continue to have additional resources at the website of Energy Safety Canada. So I ask again, what are your takeaways or what are your thoughts around this video? And we will harvest those thoughts and then making sure that we use those suggestions in trying to get additional resource for us as we all focus on these hazards in our industry. The passion that Alan showed is also, very much shared by all of us we are seeing on this call today. We have really invested time and energy getting us to this point and trying to encourage everyone to join us in this journey of making people going home every day to see their family. So I'm not sure if there has been any response in the chat. I don't just want to continue to talk. Is there any? Yeah, I can see light fixtures. Okay. James was saying that light fixtures, removable handrails, hand tools, equipment components. My takeaway is that it is about time that this is adopted as an industry as a whole. That is very good, encouraging words. And I know that Robert is hearing that, and we will take it further as we evolve this chapter into a more formidable opportunity for us as an industry. Mark also mentioned that the failure of the tripod holding the pipe was interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. And somehow we don't pay attention to some of those tools that we are using until there is an incident to see that this has corroded over time and cannot sustain the weight of that item that we are putting on top. For sure. I wonder if people consider these devices to be lifting equipment and have them included in the audit inspection programs. That's a very good suggestion. And I hope that people that are on the call will continue to harvest some of these ideas and take it back to your organization and incorporate as part of your fatality prevention process. You know, cable tray covers and fall of antenna. So I really appreciate the engagement here that people are making that suggestion. So so in conclusion, continue to submit your suggestions. That would be great. But as I want to conclude on that video, I read through this 3M Canada assessment or kind of research they did. And they came up with 10 reasons why object drops, 10 reasons why objects gets dropped. And the topmost there is inadequate risk assessment. Like somebody just mentioned, audit program, identifying that tripod. somehow we don't really focus on some of those small issues. Unfortunately, those small issues are the ones that will really create the hazards. The second one they mentioned is human factors. And the third one, they say inadequately stored or secure tools and equipment. And you have heard Alan mention, we have tons and tons of tools from Drops Online that we can harvest. And even we have so many vendors also supplying us the secure, reliable securing tools that we can use to avoid objects dropping from height. Inadequate procedure is one of those things that they also identify. Failed fixtures and fittings, that's number 5. And then number 6, poor housekeeping. And it also talk about collisions and snagging. Number 8 talks about inadequate inspection, repairs, and maintenance, which maybe many of us will identify in our own organization. The 9th one, they talk about redundant, neglected, and homemade tools and equipment. Many people, they have thought that, oh, I've been doing this for long, and then you bring an equipment from your house to come and use in your own facility. Unfortunately, those type of homemade equipment may not be good enough for the type of job we are doing. And lastly, we talk about environmental factors. In that micro learning, you saw that when she opened the door and came out, and it talked about the snow, weather, you know, environmental factors can easily brought about some of these fraud objects. You saw that truck also with the icicles coming from that shocks that the guy was putting by the tire, you know. So some of these things we need to pay attention to it. And I want to just stop by saying, please join us in this journey, and so that we can all make sure that we arrest the hazards of drops in our everyday activity as we go along in this journey. Thank you so much. I turn it back to Jose.
Thank you, Avi. So, okay, guys, as you can see, you know, it is a lot of passion in this group, and it's a really great presentation from Alan, Robert, and Abby. So we would like to hear from you as well, like, you know, sharing your own experience and how is your journey to prevent drop objects. So next step for the Canadian chapter, that is official starting today, but we start working last year, like collecting the best practices and this micro learning as well. Like as you can see, when we put people together and learning together, we are able to do this kind of job. So that's why we are inviting you guys to come and join us as well, to share your experience and how we can improve drops prevention. So the first step you have to do is sign up to become members of the Canadian chapter. And it is going to be, we already told you, but Robert, could you remind them how to do it?
You're mute.
You're mute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's 2 ways of getting there. Basically, you can go to the Drops site, so dropsonline.org, and click on Global Chapters and click on the Canadian one, and then the instructions are there. You can also get to that same site from our website at Energy Safety Canada, where you click on Dropped Objects and scroll to the bottom, and there's instructions and links there as well. And Energy Safety Canada is the secretariat, and Jose and Suncor are the chair, yeah, we want you to get involved.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, I believe there is a question. There is a fee? It is not a fee for that, right, Robert?
No, yeah, no
at least
fee,
as I know. No, there is no free. It's free sharing, as Alan say. You know, all the information is for free. Like, you know, it is good value to be member, because you are going to be involving in the creation of more information that we can share with more people. And while, as Alan saying during his presentation, while we share more learnings through the any organizations, we are going to be capable to prevent more drops object injuries or fatalities in the future. So we totally have, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and so you people can actually become members of Drops, you know, globally as well. and there's instructions on how to do that on the drop site, where you get access to, Alan sends them out kits and other things as well. So there is the opportunity for that, but from the Canadian chapter perspective, no, there's no fee. But if you want to sort of belong to the global sort of membership, and have your name on their website and stuff like that, and get access to some of the additional resources that they send out, that there is that option as well.
Okay, so next meeting we have already have been planning to our next meeting for June 2nd in the afternoon. The following one will be October 6th in the morning. Anyway, we are going to be providing more information about agendas and times of those meetings. And as I say, it's going to be less formal than today. It's more like an open conversation. It is a really hard working group and passion what we are doing for this chapter. The format of the meeting will be like more presentation, sharing learnings and data. It is really important. You don't know how much important when you are presenting this to your leaders in your organization. They like to see graphics, they like to see numbers, and also it is important for you as a safety professional or somebody that provide recommendations back to the organization to have the proper data from your site. In that way, you can provide the proper recommendations and take the proper action for that. So we want to hear from you, please, for next meeting, June 2nd, given a proposal of presentation. We are open for you to be sharing your journey for dropout prevention. We will provide more information later on about this meeting and agendas and who is going to be presenting. That is the idea. But please, share your experience and sign into this Canadian chapter. Okay. So that is the next step. Go ahead, Robert. Sorry.
I was just going to mention, yeah, so the next session won't be conducted in a webinar. So it will be like a meeting invite that we'll send out through Outlook. You will not get access to that meeting invite if you are not signed up with the Canadian chapter to get that email. So if you want to be on that, you need to go through the process that we outlined here, because the next one won't be done in a webinar format like we're doing here, where it will be sort of to member invitation to members sort of only, if you will.
Yeah, because we don't want to be annoying sending emails to everybody that they are not interested in the information we are going to be sharing. But we know if you are attending this webinar, it's because you are really interested in drops prevention. Okay, those are the next steps. Now I believe we are ready for questions. Any question you have for us, we can answer right now.
Are they going to be posting any on chat or unmuting themselves?
Yeah, post them through chat.
Okay. So maybe Handy can help harvest them.
Yeah, you bet, Abby. Anything that rolls in here, I will pass through. Will copies of the presentations be made available to participants, and where would those be found?
So this is being recorded as a webinar. We can post copies of the presentation when we post the webinar. So we have a section on the Energy Safety Canada website called events, and if you go on that link, and you'll see there's a drop-down menu that has events on demand, and you can scroll down and find this event, and we can post the presentation material there as well. And also the recording will be there, so you can go and watch this or share it with other folks, and that might be very helpful too if you're talking within your own organization about getting on board, and you have questions from your leaders to say, well, what is this? What is this Drops Canadian chapter? What is that? You can actually just say, well, here, go watch the session that I attended, and they can watch it at their leisure and go, oh, okay, thanks very much. Yeah, that's great. Let's get on board.
And we've got a question here from Gregory. KCA Dutag Drilling is a DROPS Silver Drop member. Does that qualify us automatically as a DROPS Canada member?
Not practically in the sense of who we're sending out, because I mean, certainly we communicate stuff within the chapter through Drops and Alan and his team of folks, with respect to the meetings and different things that are coming up. But we can't be sending out like an invitation to a meeting to the entire Drops, all the chapters and saying, hey, come if you want. Logistics around that are just too difficult. So no, you need to actually, go through that process to get sort of invited to that.
All right, and then a private message here from Rod, and it's a note. The Canadian geophysical industry has put together a document on handling of dangerous trees. That was in conjunction with Energy Safety Canada, and that's available on the website for anyone who is looking to address, that falling tree issue. And just to throw back to that WCD data, that was a high consequence segment in the data set. So
yeah, and in some cases you might think, well, people that are having falling tree issues are going to be just, say seismic. They're going in and they're taking down a row of trees and putting in a seismic line. And certainly, there's obviously inherent risk with that, and we get that. But the reality is that dangerous tree issues relate across the industry, particularly if you're not in the prairie area, sort of around Calgary, and you're heading up north. Boreal forest kind of stuff, then you're dealing with trees. And when we look at the data, we can certainly see that these type of issues are affecting a variety of industry codes, whether it's companies that are working in the pipeline industry or walking down a right of way for a pipeline and a tree falls and smokes someone as they're going by, or coming into a lease site and they haven't cut back the trees around the access gate, and something gets knocked off as they're bringing in a rig or another piece of equipment, and it hits a worker. And so the reality is that this is an issue that most of us are probably not aware of as much as we need to be. We just take it for granted, right? We're walking next to trees. I mean, there's that great guideline that Rod had mentioned that really goes into understanding, the risk factors and how to manage these things.
Thanks, Robert. And then another question here from Jeffrey. How does this group integrate into the North American DROPS organization? That might be a question for Alan, actually.
Yeah, perfect. The North America chapter, with its name, we had originally considered would encompass the entire land mass north of Central America in the original concept of the chapters. But really the North America chapter, the members are really focused on like deep water operations, Gulf of Mexico operations. But within that group, we do have some key individuals within Shell and Hess and Chevron and Schlumberger, and they're willing to kind of reach out. But again, we're promoting a Canadian chapter that under the DROPS banner can come together and meet. If there's anyone that has some information that could be shared that's relevant between what you might call the kind of North America chapter or the US contingent, but there will be learnings, cross learnings. But hopefully through DROPS Global, you will be able to identify those opportunities. If you take, for example, DROPS Saudi and then DROPS Oman, they work really well individually, but then there are some things that are perhaps, if it involves service partners, they will come together and discuss specific issues. But typically, we're talking about specific regional challenges, and I would urge the DROPS Canada chapter to kind of reach out to all the work that's been done in the Newfoundland and Labrador area and the offshore there, because again, there's lots of learnings that come from there. So I think the beauty of it is that whether it's through Drops Global or through your individual contacts, you know, everybody in that whole landmass will all have the opportunity to share. But as Robert says, I mean, you obviously still have to control who comes into your chapter and who sits and has those discussions through the Energy Safety Canada Secretariat, which is what we're kind of promoting.
Yeah, and so we thanks, Alan. I mean, I have had some discussions with the North American chapter, and then several people, including Jose, who's our chair with Suncor, actually participate in the North American chapter as well. And so I think there's going to be good cross collaboration between that group and this group. Granted, you know, we have a lot of commonality, but we have some differences as well around, like you say, Alan, you know, there's certainly a deep water focus there in the Gulf of Mexico, but we have, you know, the Eastern Canada operations that we definitely want to include in this work as well.
And then we have a comment there from Brandon. We have a drops committee here in the basin in Eastern Canada, and it's made up of primarily operators. I believe Brandon's with ExxonMobil. You know, I do think that, you know, that's what Alan was referring to, that offshore group who has done some great work out there in the east, and my guess is on Hibernia, but I'm a little removed from that.
Yeah, I want to maybe Robert can expatiate on that. I guess this Canadian chapter is not focused on Western Canada. It's focused on entire landmass of Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the Canadian chapter, we're certainly interested in you know, extending outreach into the Eastern operations. I don't see that as being outside of scope for us. You know, you know, I certainly, and yeah, we're happy to include those folks in the conversations. I see that as a win-win. You know, there might be some things obviously that they're doing that maybe aren't the best sort of fit for some of the stuff that you know we're doing, but I think that the reality is I don't see that as being something that we would exclude. I certainly think that we would encourage them to be part of this process, and they may do things on their own as well already, because there's just things that are better fits for them, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, we're happy to include anyone and everyone, and then the same thing goes for sort of related industries too. I mean, if power industries and other renewable energy industries and other things want to get involved, you know, we're certainly, you know, construction. There's just a lot of industry that ties and connects to oil and gas that we you know, we certainly see is very applicable to this. And if folks are in, you know, working for some other company that maybe doesn't even connect that strongly with oil and gas, and they want to be part of the operations, we certainly welcome that as well.
So
that being
one
said,
big
I mean,
family.
that being said, the focus, you know, and resources and things that we create over the years is certainly going to have an oil and gas focus to it. So if you work for, I don't know, McGavin's Bread or something, and you want to be part, yes, absolutely. But are we going to spend a whole bunch of time creating resources for, you know, that type of industry? Probably not. But yeah, the invitation is open to anyone that can learn from dropped objects, and anyone we can learn from their experiences on dropped objects, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat here dealing with gravity, and these learnings apply across industries. They're not, you know, something that's just specific to oil and gas.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, the main objective is getting everybody go home every night, irrespective of the industry. You know, so I mean, everyone can come in and let's become part of big family. At the end of the day, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. What is currently existing or that has been provided, we can always, I mean, take a cue from it and use it as appropriate.
if I can just add in one other benefit, I think, of having you know, the concept of it being focused on Canada is that there's a greater opportunity to start exploring, you know, through whether it's through manpower or through petroleum boards, you know, how the best practice can become more standardized and more accepted. So you know, the work that everybody has committed to offshore on the Grand Banks and Hibernia, etc. I would urge you to kind of explore that. There are so many best practices and proof of how DROP's best practices have kind of created benefits. So you know, I would urge that there's communication between that kind of eastern seaboard side, and you know, for me, I think one of the big positive messages from there is, you know, that the Petroleum Board have taken on board some of these best practices, and together they've made these commitments. You know, so in some cases, you know, what we present as DROP's best practice is now actually physically mandatory. You know, it's a great example of when everybody can come together and also bring in all of those other associations and influencers and stakeholders in the industry, a broader industry. So, you know, I would urge you to kind of work together.
Cool, Alan. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, collaboration is key on safety. Safety shouldn't be proprietary. It basically, if someone has something, we want to hear about it. If you've come up with a new widget, we want to hear about it. If you've got a new way of dealing with something, we want to hear about it. You know, it's about getting information in the hands of people and moving this conversation forward in a broader way. So I think we'll pass over to Andy now to kind of wrap up things. Andy.
Very good. Thank you, Robert. And also, if you have any particular challenges, we want to hear about that as well. Collectively, maybe we can work to solve those, or you know, maybe the DROPS group or Energy Safety Canada can develop a resource around those things. Speaking of resources and then upcoming webinars, we do have some upcoming that might be of interest to some of you. February 12th, we are hosting a presentation from the Canadian Energy Museum out of Leduc. Actually on the site of Leduc number 1, which kicked off Canada's oil and gas boom decades ago. So come and see what the evolution of safety has been throughout the years. And then on February 24th, we have a presentation with the Saskatchewan Chiropractic Association, Think Twice, Lift Once, Back Care and Safety. And now recently added, just yesterday, we have a presentation on March 17th, Breaking the Stigma One Save at a Time. And that's a discussion on removing the stigma on discussions of mental health. And that's with ex-NHL goaltender Corey Hirsch. He won a gold medal with Canada in 1990, pardon me, a silver medal with Canada in 1994, and went on to win a Stanley Cup with the New York Rangers and finished his career off in Vancouver. We're very excited to have him. It is notable there is a fee for that particular webinar. We're charging $15, but we think that's a good value for the presentation we'll get, again, with Corey Hirsch. And you can register at energysafetycanada.com/events, much in the same way you registered for this one. So please join us. All right, and then we should have an upcoming survey that will come to you in your email in the next hour or so. Robert, can you just, there we go. Please let us know how we're doing. What did you think of the presentation today? What was the number one takeaway? What can we improve on? And then what other topics of interest do you have? Could we have other presentations on those? If you are really excited to get that survey out to us, the link there is at the bottom, and I will add that into the chat. But if not, it should come to you shortly. So with that, no other questions have popped into the chat. So I think we'll close out a minute or two early here. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your presentations today. I, in fact, learned a few more things, as Alan would be happy to hear. So Alan, Abby, Jose, and of course, Robert, thank you so much. And we'll be chatting again soon.
Thank you.